Good morning, church. I hope that you have all had a wonderful week and are enjoying your summer. In last week's preach, Pastor Diane looked at Nehemiah's responses to what he sees and hears in Jerusalem, and she concluded with the appeal for each of us to be people who take risks as a result of our compassion. And following on from that, today we're going to be looking at how Nehemiah built through constant opposition, distraction and intimidation, by staying focused on the build, and how we can continue building through such things ourselves today. Because when God calls us to build his kingdom, opposition will come. The enemy never fights what is not a threat, and I think this is something that we all may feel we face at different times in our lives. Nehemiah understood this. He was called to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, but the real battle was not with bricks and stones. It was discouragement, distraction, fear and opposition. So this morning we're going to look at 4 areas: the way opposition always comes when we start to build, how discouragement is real even for godly people, how Nehemiah overcame his opposition, and finally how we can keep building God's kingdom when opposition comes against us. So opposition always comes when we start building. The moment Nehemiah began rebuilding, resistance appeared. In Nehemiah 4, Sanballat and Tobiah mocked and ridiculed the work, attempting to use calculated distractions to stop the project. In 4:2, they say, "What do these poor, feeble Jews think that they are doing?" The enemy loves to attack what God is building. But notice something really important. Before the wall was rebuilt, nobody cared. But once progress started happening, opposition appeared, and that can still be the same today. When we start praying faithfully, serving constantly, maybe even beginning to rebuild broken relationships, opposition comes. And then when we start growing spiritually, or maybe even start building a ministry, opposition comes again and again, just as it did for Nehemiah and his workers. Because the enemy will not waste time attacking what comes in different forms. First of all, there was mockery and intimidation. Nehemiah was laughed at. Now, some people may mock your faith and the changes you make to your life. Others may say things like, "Oh, you've changed, you're always at church. You take this God thing far too seriously." Or they may even say something like, "Why do you think God can choose you?" But ridicule is often proof that you are moving in the right direction. The enemy is threatened to attack on the wall builders in Jerusalem in a hope that they would stop building. You see, the goal of intimidation is not always complete destruction. Sometimes it's just paralysis. Fear can often stop us building before the enemy even begins to touch us. And then there was distraction. Nehemiah's enemies repeatedly asked him to leave the wall and meet with them. And in Nehemiah 6:3, we are told that Nehemiah replied by saying, "I am engaged in great work and I cannot come down. Why should I stop working to come and meet with you?" And that's really powerful, because Nehemiah knew that it was just a distraction to leave what he was called to do. The enemy cannot always stop you, but he will definitely try to distract you. So don't get distracted dealing with people who are against you, church. Some believers are not defeated by sin, but they can be defeated by distraction. Discernment is being able to see the motives when everything on the surface looks quite innocent. The second thing I'd like to look at is the fact that discouragement is real, even for us as believers. Sometimes we can read about our Bible heroes and think that they never struggled emotionally. But Nehemiah must have felt pressure, and certainly the people began to feel discouraged. In chapter 4:10, we read, "The strength of the labourers is giving out, and there is so much more rubble that we cannot build the wall." They were exhausted, they were hot, tired. All they could see was the rubble, the dust, the broken walls, the opposition, the threats, and actually at the time what must have felt like really slow progress. and discouragement set in. One of the enemy's greatest weapons is just that. Discouragement now, as back then, quite often whispers rather than shouts. So it whispers, this is too hard, nothing is changing, I or we will never complete this. So many people stop building not because they lack calling, but because they lose heart. And the enemy knows that if he cannot destroy your calling, he will try to drain your courage and your enthusiasm. And even strong believers get discouraged sometimes. In the book of 1 Kings, Elijah became discouraged immediately after his victory over the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. He even asked God to take his life. In both 1 and 2 Samuel, David experienced discouragement and distress, and he actually documents these dark periods in the Psalms. In the New Testament, Paul faced discouragement and exhaustion several times due to fierce persecution, rejection, and the pressure of leading the churches. However, in Galatians, he reminds believers not to grow weary in doing good. And in 2 Corinthians, Paul declares that because of God's mercy, we do not lose heart. So remember, discouragement itself is not failure, but choosing to stay there can be dangerous. So how did Nehemiah begin to overcome this opposition? Well, first of all, he took the battle to God in prayer. Nehemiah's first response was prayer. Initially, he prayed for 128 days before starting 120 days before starting any work at all. 120 days of prayer for what ultimately was a 52-day build. Instead of panicking, he prayed. Before he organised the workers, he sought God. That teaches us that prayer should never be our last resort of the believer, but always our first strategy in anything that we do. When opposition comes, we are all to pray before reacting, before quitting. Definitely pray before even thinking about retaliating. Some battles cannot be won with talent or effort alone. They require spiritual strength. And the church does not advance by human strength alone, but only by our dependence on God. And the second thing Nehemiah did was that he kept building despite all of the distractions. And that's key. Nehemiah did not wait for the opposition to disappear before continuing. We're told in Nehemiah 4:6, so we built the wall, and the entire wall was joined together up to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. They kept building while opposition was happening. Some people maybe wait for perfect conditions to obey God, but they don't necessarily ever happen. And faithfulness means that we build in difficult times, in difficult seasons. So I encourage all of you to do as Nehemiah and his teams did. Build while tired, build whilst being criticised, build while being misunderstood, build while being opposed. You see, the enemy wants you to stop, but here's the thing. Persistence frustrates hell, and that's what we want to do. Thirdly, Nehemiah adjusted without quitting. He equipped the men and prepared for attack. So they worked with one hand and held a weapon in the other, and he stationed guards among the families to protect them and the vulnerable areas around the city. See, Nehemiah was both spiritual and practical. So faith is not about ignoring reality. Faith is trusting God whilst wisely preparing. And as believers, we need prayer, wisdom, discernment, and perseverance. In Matthew 10:16, Jesus told his disciples to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, and we're to be the same. So do not come down from your prayer life, your integrity, your calling, your devotion to Christ, and your commitment to God's house. The enemy loves pulling people off the wall. Some people leave their assignment that God gave them because they become distracted by offence, by comparison, drama, criticism and temptation. But I urge you all, keep building and stay on the wall. So how do we overcome opposition today? What can we do to help ourselves? I just want to really quickly look at 4 ways we can do that. So first of all, remember who called you. Nehemiah knew that this work was from God. When you know God called you, opposition does not shake you off as easily. If people start a vision, people can stop it. But if God started it, God will sustain you through it. Your confidence must come from God's calling and not from people's approval. The second thing is to build together. Nehemiah did not do this work alone. Everyone had a section of the wall. The kingdom of God is built through unity. When we're isolated or trying to do things in our own strength, it merely increases discouragement. It's much easier for the enemy to attack isolated believers. We need fellowship, encouragement, accountability, and a home church. The third thing is to guard your focus. The enemy constantly tried pulling Nehemiah away from the assignment. Focus is a form of spiritual warfare. We live in distracted times. There's endless noise, endless opinions, endless comparison. But kingdom builders stay focused. Remember, not every opportunity is from God. Not every conversation deserves your energy or your overthinking. Some things are assignments and some things are just distractions. And the fourth thing is keep your eyes on the bigger purpose. Nehemiah was not just rebuilding a wall, he was restoring a people. And what we build for God now also matters eternally. Every prayer matters, every act of obedience matters, every soul matters, every seed that we plant matters. Sometimes our progress can feel slow, but God sees every brick, every stone that is being laid for his kingdom. So in conclusion, church, despite all opposition, the wall was completed in 52 days, which is actually a relatively short amount of time for the amount of work that needed to be done. And that is because the people refused to quit. The enemy opposed them, they kept building. The enemy mocked them, they kept building. The enemy threatened them, they kept building. The enemy distracted them, and they kept building. And that's really my message today. Keep building. Do not let opposition stop what God has started in your life. Some of you have been discouraged. Some have become distracted. Some have grown weary in the work. But I think that God is saying to all of us, stay on the wall. The kingdom is always worth building. Your assignment still matters. The call of God on your life has not changed. Even when opposition comes, church, keep building.
Thanks, Joe. What an incredible message about building through opposition. I think we all know that when you're doing anything of significance, there's going to be opposition.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
actually learning to build through it, you can't always stop and then pick up the build after the opposition has stopped. You build through it, I think is really, really great. And my takeaway, Joe said one line, my takeaway was simply this, that discouragement whispers rather than shouts. Wow.
That's good.
You know, you expect the opposition to come in a loud form, but sometimes those niggling whispers in our heart, in our mind, in our spirit, where the enemy's getting in, they can do more damage than I think a massive shout. And so there's something for me to take away and really, I think on. It's very, very good.
That's good. I love the line where Joe said that persistence frustrates hell. And she was talking about like not giving up and not quitting. And I think that just, I don't know, that's the sort of thing that just makes, you know, sort of like makes your blood boil and think, well, I don't want to quit then, I just want to keep going. So I feel encouraged actually that actually if we're to be persistent, we're to just keep going.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was good.
Absolutely. So we are going to come to some questions. What are some of the questions we've got, James?
Okay, so the first question for us this morning is how do you react when opposition comes your way? Do you react well, Joe?
I'd like to say I do, but there are probably some times when I don't. I think is the short answer to that.
Joe's put, consider your initial and secondary reactions.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Maybe
isn't
my
it?
initial reaction is take a deep breath and then come out with the secondary reaction.
Maybe my initial reaction is have a hissy fit, and my secondary reaction is a little bit more considered. If I'm being really honest, there. So that's a very, very good question. Because then the second question I want you to think about is, when you've done that, how do you then begin to deal with opposition? Because until you've dealt with your response, you can't always deal with the opposition. So how do you then begin to deal with opposition?
Yeah, that's another good question. And then number 3, we have got, can you recognise where God is in the middle of life and how he is orchestrating the things that you need the most? So that's a good question for us there, isn't it?
Good discussion, I think,
discussion,
around
good
that one. We'll all
challenge,
have some good stories, I think, about what God's done in us. And then lastly, if you get onto these, it's simply this: how easily do you find it to remember who called you and guard your focus? And how would remembering these things help your focus and help you to keep building? So how easy do you find it to remember who called you? And the Bible tells us, doesn't it, that when God calls us, he's going to equip us.
Yeah,
and that if
right.
God is for us, who can be against us? So as you are answering that question, answer it from a point of view of, actually, God, if you have called me, and if I remember that, I'm going to remember who dare stand against me, because they're not just going to be standing against me, they're going to be standing against you. So I think that will be really, really great. And it's been great just having a little bit of post-preach chat with you this morning, James.
Yeah,
and
lots to think about. Yeah.
Absolutely tons. Enjoy your discussion, and we hope you are loving our devotions if you signed up for them. And because I'm loving reading what Craig has written for us, so I'm loving that as well. So great discussions, church, and we will see you next week.